Marco heads up the Enterprise Architect group inside SAP IT. So the perspective he's giving you is actually SAP as a customer in his conversation. So very pleased that he spent the time to come over Germany. I do want to tease forward one thing that in his sessions this afternoon. I've heard questions from many of you saying there are many different types of architects out there, and to put some context around the different roles and things like that. Marco was just telling me, we were chatting about in terms of that, they've done a lot of SAP to look at the different roles of architecture. Marco's going to talk about that more in a session this afternoon, so I want to tease that forward a bit, just to respond to a few of you who've asked that questions. That's one thing as a community we're going to talk about more as well, both the different types of architectures and the different architects and the different evolution of the different roles. But Marco has a lot to share, so let me turn it over to Marco. Thanks, Marco.
Yeah, thanks, Paul. And with that, let's quickly dive in. I mean, some might have seen the panel discussion yesterday where we already talked a bit in exchange, and just want to give a bit of more details on my journey in SAP as the head of enterprise architecture, which I took over 4 years back. Why do I start with a strategy slide? It's not that I want to explain you SAP strategy, but I've given that slide to my architects when I took over. And guess what? There was not a single one who could tell me more than, yeah, we have a cloud strategy, kind of. Yeah. So I started educating the guys then 4 years back to really have a serious understanding of your strategy for my architects. But also when I interviewed several guys in the business, especially in the LOBs, they had also somehow a rough guess that we have a strategy and that it might have a bit of an impact on their LOB strategy. But not something in a structured way, not something written down, no clear context, no clear understanding. That's why the first thing I did, educating my team and also educating parts of the organization to really seriously make themselves familiar with the strategy, because that's where all the enterprise architecture stuff started. That's what gives you all the arguments from a business perspective, the priorities. Then in the end, you can then justify why an S4 or a BTP or AI, all these fancy technologies have a sense, and it's worth to implement and get value out of them. In addition to that, I started to try to create a few basic, simple to understand artifacts for the organization. As I said, we have a cloud strategy in SAP. But actually, what does that mean? I mean, there's different flavors of cloud, and I just always try to do that with some acronyms, because that's then easy to understand. I mean, for the older ones, and I see a lot of older faces here, even more gray than I am these days, the DeLorean. That is my acronym to how we shaped our deals with all of the large customers in the past. So every contract we made was handcrafted. Every exception, every special thing of every customer was reflected in a contract. And you can imagine what that means for internal processes at SAP. They call it nicely hand-gloved, all the processes with hand-gloved processes. But what did that mean? We had so many process variants and so many exceptions, which in the end also replicated down into technical depth and a super high complexity. But that's not what you want when you have a cloud strategy, because cloud strategy is about standardization, automation. That's why what we also want to sell going forward, and started with subscription and these new business models which we're having, is more the Tesla. We want to provide value, we want to update based on software, easy to do. And we had to learn a lot on that way as SAP for sure, yeah? Because in the past it was deal done, sell license, a bit of maintenance, how the customer builds the system, how he operates, if he does that good or not so good. It's up to you. If you do it not so good, we have support to help. And SAP with the cloud strategy, we also had to learn what does it mean to run systems for the customers, how to run them efficiently, and also ensure that you have a happy customer, because you now focus more on renewal, not just the initial deal. So that helped a lot, especially outside the IT, to really understand what cloud means. And the second core artifact I then created is I said, guys, so far we said we have a principle of one process for everything, one architecture for everything. But if you have such diverse business models, I said, guys, we are the only ones who try the classical business and a fully automated low-touch business to squeeze that into one process and architecture framework, which is a mission almost impossible. And that explained why we had a lot of inefficiency internally, a lot of sunk costs, and a lot of challenges also for the enterprise architecture team, because the enterprise architecture team 4 years back was just running behind. There was not such a structure and explanation which gave you the framing to do good enterprise architecture. So we had to bring that in. There was no one other than enterprise architecture who was really able to nail that down and make it understandable, even on the business side and the business architecture level. Yeah? And for sure, that is already, as you can see, for me was the preparation, the segue then to the real architecture work in the IT. Yeah? And the synonym of the house is really a nice one. And I will talk later more about our own RISE journey, because that in the end is the frame to deviate going forward from a single process and single enterprise architecture strategy around one ERP. Strategy to execution, a methodology for business transformation. I mean, in some sessions you might see that without the first circle. You mainly see process and solutioning. I brought that third circle on it because you need to first have your capabilities and priorities right, and the enterprise architecture, before you then start diving into processes and look into optimization potential and changing processes. If you don't know the what, you don't need to talk about the how. In SAP in the past, internally, we often tended to talk about the how, and this really extremely, very long, very deep, without understanding the what, actually, what we need and what is the difference going forward for the company. And then guess what? What I also started creating is an easy-to-consume picture. How does strategy to execution work in SAP? Because when I took over, I asked 20, 30 different people, stakeholders across the organization. Everyone said, yeah, we somehow have a strategy to execution process. But when I then asked, okay, can you show me one slide to explain who is involved, how does it run sequence-wise, what goes in, what comes out of the individual steps? 30 interviews, 40 opinions. Then I started to create this slide, and that was a shiny, eye-opening thing up to our board to say, okay, that's actually how we need to do it. And you can see down in the middle, and we learned that also in the opening session from Wendy, is the business capability model. That is front and center these days of our whole strategy to execution process. When I took over business capabilities, yeah, everyone heard about it somehow. It was not clear what the value is. But more and more, after a few months, they started getting it, and they started to understand the power really from the executive level down to the IT delivery guys. Because in the end, that is the common language we are talking these days. It helps in an easy way to articulate priorities. It allows in an easy way to show how mature am I on certain capabilities which I need to improve to execute on my strategy. And on the other side, it helps us also twice a year, we reassess. So this means if we do implement stuff, if we change processes, did that really help to improve and increase the maturity? And we had some interesting findings in the beginning, because IT portfolio, we have a defined budget per year, as every IT organization might have. But we had thousands of priorities which were basically thrown without any governance on the IT. And that's been drastically reduced by having clear criteria what a certain strategic initiative needs to fulfill. It needs to really go to a strategic capability. It needs to fit into our strategic KPI framework to say, okay, what's the value I get out of it? It needs to undergo a first level of an architecture assessment from my team. And only then there's the handshake between the business and the IT that we say, yes, this is a reasonable initiative, and then we proceeded further down into the execution. I mean, that was for sure for the business a hard time, because we had to change also their perception. We are not the order takers. We are the trusted advisors, and we tell you with what technology you will improve your stuff. And they had to learn that they're no longer the ones. I mean, maybe it's a bit specific to a high-tech company, I don't know, but they have thrown pixel-perfect technology roadmaps over the fence and said, this is the products which solve all our problems. And I said, no, guys, you tell me your business problem and what you intend to improve, and we tell you what is the best solution to do the job. That was also a bit of a cultural shock for these guys, but in the meantime, that works extremely well and helps big times to have transparency, take educated decisions along the line, and everyone has a clear role in that process. The business capability map, I'll not go too much in detail. That's just a condensed view. For sure, it's a bit more. But typically, what we had as a guidance is we model every L1 area down to level 3, because that's basically where we can then do enterprise architecture, define North Star, do the product selection, that's all these kind of things. We have areas where we go to a level 4 or level 5 maximum, but the general guiding rule is down to level 3, and the second guiding rule is one application per L3 capability. And that is the two things which completely turned the needle, because that really then forced also the business to reassess the mess which they've created in the past. For instance, in marketing, and I mean, that is a well-known LOB, I would say, to try to kill everything, and either with marketeers or with tools. And if you have then 10, 15, 20 tools for the same capability, even for them, it was immediately obvious, okay, guys, there's a lot of potential to save, to streamline in the end, and also simplify our lives. Because if you have 20 tools, and you also need to manage them from a business side, consumes money, it confuses people, and in the end, it's nothing you can do if you really want to be successful in a very competitive environment as an organization. And basically, on the map, we were then able to articulate clearly the strategic transformation priorities of the company, which then lead to strategic projects in the end. Yeah? When we've done that exercise first, it was interesting that the top 10 strategic initiatives, 7 of them wanted to touch the same business capability, managed quote, for instance. And you can imagine if 10 or 7 initiatives try to touch the same thing, it's designed to be a disaster, yeah? Because who touches it first, who does what, who is driving, all of these things we could then easily sort out with a capability map, and with that ensuring that also the strategic initiatives have then the right scoping, and that we also understand how do they need to play together, because none of these initiatives is independent. Yeah? That's the very end of the journey. It took me around about 4 years to really get it into that shape, which I'm explaining now. So message number 1 is you need executive buy-in. Message number 2 is people need to be a bit patient, because either you do it seriously and then it can pay off, yeah, or you do it like what we heard yesterday in a panel, a bit of the EA project mode. You do something 3 months and then it's for nothing. You can forget about it. That's what I told my CIO when I took over. I said, give me 12 to 18 months to build a foundation, and then over 1-2 years, we can then basically grow it, and then it's a different game going forward. For sure, these executives only tick in quarters, so it was a hard time for him to hear 12 to 18 months. But in the end, he's more than happy, and it brought him into a completely different role, also against his peers, yeah, on L1 level, which is 1 level below the board. Yeah. So that really also turned the needle for him and his position, and being more a strong challenger and advisor to the other LOBs, and not just the one, hey, you run the IT, you do what I say, I know best, go, take the budget, execute. Yeah. All right, what did I need to do in addition to that? That outside things I did across the company, for sure, I also had to reassess a bit my own practice. What I've seen the first 2 weeks, I was just joining a few of my teammates in their daily work, and I must say, what I've seen was interesting, but it was not what I would have perceived as enterprise architecture work, and especially doing that in a very exposed and value-adding way. So I then basically stepped in and started creating a few core services, simply that we can articulate to the outside world, actually, what are we doing for the organization, that we have clear structure, a clear outcome, a clear value proposition, plus we have a lot of foundational things by doing architecture governance. We are, as a first customer, having a regular dev IT engagement where we tell development what does work for us, what doesn't work for us. So all of these things you need to articulate that because, I mean, you don't do architecture for yourself and just to show that you know all the technologies and you're the only one who understands the complexity. No, you're doing that for the company. And then you also need to find a way to communicate and articulate to the company what you do and why you do it. Yeah? Service portfolio, I've standardized, was very key that every stakeholder understands what do I get from these guys. Yeah? And the second thing is core artifacts. And you see still a lot of PowerPoint here for sure, but we have radically standardized the key artifacts we need to communicate, yeah, being it architecture principles, being it our own technology strategy. So we have, since 3 years, we are writing on a yearly basis a technology strategy for the IT. And this is not a 3 to 5 years thing, because that was one of the main problems. If you just do 3 to 5 years, your delivery folks in the IT say, these ivory tower freaks, guys there, 3 years, I don't care. I mean, I need to know what I need to do the next 12 to 18 months. That's why basically out of the 3 to 5 years work, we basically also give a transitional guidance to the organization, 12 to 18 months. What is the big tickets, the big topics we as an IT organization need to focus on to implement, to execute on the 3 to 5 years. Yeah? Capability map, I told it already. An architecture North Star, the big picture, I mean, we have round about 3,000 applications in our portfolio. We had a kind of a marketing North Star architecture, but what I have here, and you see that later on a bit bigger then you can take the photos, that's better than here. This one here is the result of real enterprise architecture work and a condensed view of the core high priority applications which we are working towards, simply to streamline and have a simple architecture. Architecture cornerstones, also very important. Every architecture decision, being it the ones from my enterprise architects or the solution or system architects which we have in the organization, must adhere to the cornerstones and the guidelines and principles. So every architecture decision, you need to relate to these, otherwise the decision will not be taken. And then for sure we have also worked out some guidelines like integration guidelines, how we use BTP, some development guidelines, also the, let's say, more the hardcore stuff for our delivery folks, simply to ensure what we architect and design in the end and also finds its way properly into the execution space. Architecture principles, I mean, I will not talk through all of them, but for sure, I mean, I am assuming most of you have the same for your organization. The only difference might be sub run sub, for sure, as I'm the IT of SAP. One of my principles is look into SAP's own portfolio first, but not only. I told it also yesterday in a panel. I mean, I'm a real enterprise architecture manager and a chief architect by heart. And I always had an agnostic view. So I also kept that agnostic view in SAP. So this means if for certain capabilities we do not have an enterprise-ready strategic solution, or something which is becoming into that stage the next 12 to 18 months, I decide differently because I also need to service a 100,000 people business and a DAX company, and therefore I cannot just be the playground and then miserably fail because they come then directly to me if we recommend something, put something out which is not ready for prime time. Data. Data is an asset. That sounds so easy. But before I took over, everyone was talking about data. It's a new goal. It's so important, blah, blah, blah. But in the end, the data architecture discipline in SAP was really a weak one. But it's the most important one because if things like AI shall pay off, if you don't have your data architecture under control, AI won't do the trick. Yeah? All right. Architecture North Star. I mean, I will not drive you through all of that, but what you can see is basically our business capability map cluster. That's the framing. And then basically it is the core solutions which make our North Star then basically per domain. On the lower levels, you see also BTP as a core element and our so-called IE data platform. And that's basically these days the most relevant platform in SAP, yeah, because that was not there before. Before that, data architecture was loosely coupled. You can imagine master data, transactional data, unstructured data. Everything was somewhere else. And we have in the meantime a dedicated team which owns that platform and the individual building blocks. And we are the business for data in SAP. And that completely turned the needle, and that's why basically our journey towards AI is a well-structured one, because the data foundation is already set and it's right. There's clear accountability. We can clearly articulate the value and the power of that platform, and that is quite key. Data is one of the domains for enterprise architecture, and don't forget that. And it's even more important than a few years back. I mean, for me it was always important, but for SAP not so much. Yeah. All right, architecture strategy. Also there you see the capability model L1 structure, and then basically we nailed down the next 12 to 18 months strategic building blocks where then our IT organization needs to focus on. I mean, you see a good balance of things in the application space. That's where then the LOB business demand came in for the strategic initiatives. And the lower level is all the enabling stuff and the foundational stuff you need to get right as an IT organization to serve the business properly, especially on new demand. Before I took over, it was always like the first LOB who wants something new had to pay the check. And that we turned around. We have now in the portfolio a dedicated cluster and budget to build these enabling technologies. And that is not competing against business priorities, which was in the past the case. And then for sure you can imagine business priorities always win against the IT stuff, so this techie stuff which no one understands. Yeah. Good. Architecture governance, another very important element. I know business hates it, and everyone hates the word governance, but also in more agile days, there is still a bit of waterfall and a bit of governance required, because otherwise, agile will lead you into a complete mess. That's my perspective, my personal one, and my experience out of many customer engagements where customers were completely going agile, central architecture teams, central decision making, don't need it. Leave it all up to these guys on a quarterly basis. They will run the show. They don't need any guardrails, boundary conditions. No, let them do it. I heard statements like minimum viable architecture and things like this, and I said no. We have a good balance, but first we had to establish architecture governance centrally with my team. This means on a monthly basis we run a architecture governance board where all the executives, the IT are represented, and where we basically log every cross-relevant architecture decision. When I took over, there was no documented decision at all. I asked, why do we that? Why do we that? Why do we that? Yeah, well, this guy or this guy decided. It's like, hey, what was the foundation? Was the options looked at, pros, cons? No. When did you decide? Where did you log it? Is there slides available? Nothing there. Yeah? So we have built up all of that last 4 years from scratch. And now this is basically the concept which is now also applied in other areas of SAP, simply to get this structure in. And coming back to the safe and agile part, for sure, we as enterprise architects have to play a role in the SAFe framework. And we looked at that very carefully. And we found practically a good balance, because what we then said, these solution design boards, that's basically where you look more into process individual solutioning stuff, so more what is specific to finance area, for instance. These ones we decentralized. This means we have provided a playbook to the agile release trains, or if we had it, solution trains, and they run their own solution design boards in the meantime, because they always said you're slow, you're blocking. And then we say, okay, guys, here, playbook, do it on your own. Document it properly. My architects are involved, but more as listeners, and to ensure that what they decide there does not have a bigger impact, because then they need to go to the architecture board. That runs quite smoothly, and it's the first time that they are also confronted with properly documenting their decisions, looking into options, and also agreeing that then if you have a solution train between different agile release trains, so also this forces them to play a more cross-role and not just focus on their specific needs. So that pays out very well these days, and with that we are a bit more agile, but still having the stuff under control, and that's really what helps us really to steer in also a more modern environment. And the term governance is in the meantime then a bit more lazy, but still we have the stuff, I would say, pretty much under control. The IT portfolio process, I will not go through all of that, but when I took over, the EA team was not involved at all in that. So what we designed somewhere, no one was basically checking if they stick to the rules. Yeah? So what we do these days, my architects are involved pretty early in the strategy execution to basically help to decide which strategic priorities will make the way down into the IT funnel. And then before it gets into the solutioning part and a final execution, they do another readiness check kind of just to see, hey, the solution design they did, the tool selection they did in the space they are able to decide, does that fit to the cornerstones, principles, guidelines? And we also ensure that what is basically documented in Jira in the epics per initiative is done in a structured way that you can understand and can also then basically further grow and distribute it downwards to individual teams. So it's a pretty advanced role. That's the first slide where you see a bit more technology on it. So our portfolio process is a combination of LeanIX and Jira where we run it. LeanIX is the business capabilities, because every epic needs a business capability. And then in Jira, we do more the nasty backlog stuff and then the execution for the individual teams. And we have some clusters, as I quickly outlined, which you can see on the left side. So to ensure that basically different things with a different purpose are not competing on budget, we have brought in these clusters. So we have clearly transformational stuff from the business side, but to ensure we can also do the other things and they are not overruled or deprioritized, we have then dedicated clusters with dedicated budget to do all the other not so fancy and not so business relevant stuff, which you need to ensure as an IT organization that the thing still runs, that you're compliant, you're fulfilling legal requirements, that you're doing the enabling technology stuff, because for sure the business will come at a certain point in time, and also to optimize the as-is, where the business also often was not willing to pay for. All right, and from there, I thought it's a good segue into our own RISE journey. I mean, 3 years back, our board member of the development organization, for sure, you can imagine, said, hey, you guys as first customer, when do you go to S4 public cloud? And then my guys went a bit nervous and said, shit, we need to look into features and functions and requirements, and it's technically impossible. And then I said, guys, no. We do it differently. We do a step back. We do a classical enterprise architecture exercise, and we start with our strategy. We are high-tech. So my first question was to development, is high-tech a priority industry? No. Okay, thank you. Then we have the first cons for the decision. And then we went in and looked into major capabilities along the end-to-end process for us as a high-tech company. And it showed that we have major solution capabilities still missing on the public cloud product, which in the end led to the decision number one is that our next step is private cloud edition, like many of the large RISE customers. The good thing is we start greenfield over there. And we start with a focus, and that's the slide here. We are going away from a single ERP strategy into a multi-ERP strategy. Because as I showed you a bit earlier on that house, maintenance license business is a completely different beast than semi or fully automated subscription business. And we want to give, let's say, following our strategy and the ambitious targets on the cloud growth, also, let's say, a dedicated environment that no one is blocking them. So that 30 years of history, we really want to keep that separate. I mean, it's still good, and we are happy that we have that model. It's still a good revenue stream, I would say. But the new business, we really wanted to give them their own freedom, that we can really basically fulfill these ambitions and really there basically leave all that legacy behind us. Yeah? I mean, for sure that this works out, master data, configuration, customizing, product, material, all these kind of things for sure need to be also treated more serious in SAP. But as I said earlier, data is in the meantime an important discipline. So with that, basically, we have created a foundation that in the end is multi-ERP template approach, which many of you customers are very used to, is also something SAP can work with going forward. And why will that help even more? This everything into public cloud, I clearly explained to our board, that's not reality anymore, at least not for us. We are a global operating company. We have global tensions, being it war-related, being it data privacy-related stuff, that certain countries are really increasing the pressure from a law perspective. And with that, we need to come up with a more flexible and composable enterprise architecture. Yeah? Because, I mean, to do that everything in a public cloud cloud-centric runway will not work. Everything in on-prem runway will not work. So that's basically this breakout here to support our strategic business going forward better is also a first step into being more flexible to be able to react from an enterprise architecture perspective on all these different things which happen on that planet in that moment. Yeah. I mean, China is an important topic at the moment where we are involved in the assessment to see based on these increased data privacy rules, how much can you do with global building blocks of a runway going forward, yeah? Or how much do you need to localize then? And only if you have basically already started to think in several runways and set the boundary conditions for that, then you can more proactively also address these challenges which come up. Because a few years back, we always tried then to find a dirty workaround to comply with these requirements. But I mean, this is not sustainable. That's not what I can support from an architecture perspective. And that's why with our RISE journey, we really start to break out of that principle of one and ensure with that we best serve our business and the differentiation in the business, which we have based on our cloud strategy and let's say the various flavors of cloud and business models we are having. For the ones who love products, first slide with products on it, just to show you quickly on the end process from lead management down to customer engagement and support. The major solutions we have is for the new commercial models is C4C for sure as our cloud CRM solution, CPQ for the quoting part, S4 on-prem, for the subscription order management, convergent charging, S/4HANA for the finance part. Then we have common components. That's the one basically where every of the individual runways then needs to integrate to. Yeah, because at a certain point in time, things need to come together. For sure, at the very beginning is you only want to have one lead management process for your field guys. Otherwise, they get crazy if they need to work with various solutions. And then very down the road, for sure, you need to be able to financially consolidate all the stuff and report one reliable number out to the market and your board. And down there you see our traditional runway, which was originally designed for our license and maintenance business. We tried over the years to cloudify it somehow for the new models, but that's what we now aggressively stopped and said, guys, no. Stop it. It's ring-fenced. It's not fully frozen. It's ring-fenced, but we only do the minimum of changes, being it legal stuff, compliance stuff, or on existing commercial models like the license and maintenance business where for sure always there's the one or the other change. Plus down there we also look a bit into how much can we do for cleaning up the core. Yeah? So we also reduce significantly modifications. You need now an approval up to L1 level if you want to modify something. That drastically has reduced that number. And we also started basically using BTP as an extension platform, re-engineered the one or the other critical capability down there, simply to shrink the system from a capability perspective and then work more on efficiency, TCO, and not putting new stuff, significant stuff for the new commercial models on it. And you see it's a broad mix of public cloud, private cloud, on-prem. I think every RISE journey will look a bit similar, because this is not the only cloud. We still have on-prem stuff. We have a lot of third-party stuff. We have custom-built stuff. So all these nice things which you somehow need to get together as an architecture team and ensure in the end you find a solution, and ideally a less complex one, to serve the business best. All right, I'll not go too much into that one. It's just showing a bit then which of the core capabilities are behind which solution along the end-to-end process. Yeah. And where we put our focus on, what is the one or the other product behind, simply to ensure we can really have here a best-in-class setup and a good reference also for many customers who are also on the way to that journey. I mean, when I regularly talk to customers, I do that a lot every quarter as a hobby besides my co-architecture work. That slides resonate very well because most of them have a multi-ERP setup. Some thought they go to a one ERP strategy, but also, especially global ones, facing the same challenges with China and other countries. They think about more, okay, how can we go into a streamlined multi-ERP setup, which allows us then to really differentiate where possible, but to keep things together where we can. And then last but not least, a short one on the modeling. And the good thing is, since we've acquired LeanIX, it's an easy conversation for me, especially internally, because before we acquired LeanIX, I was always asked, why do you use LeanIX? We have own architecture modeling tools. This discussion is over. We use LeanIX based on how we do enterprise architecture. So we didn't have the tool first. It was how I do enterprise architecture management. And for me, LeanIX was the best fit because it was very ecosystem, community, collaboration-driven, use case focused. You could nicely visualize and show things. And therefore, that is basically my way to explain why we use LeanIX. Just a glimpse on key stakeholders on the platform. My team has around about 30 architects to serve that 100,000 people company, which is still not enough, but it's okay these days. We have around about 2,000 regular users on the platform on a monthly basis. So you can guess 2,000 minus 30, it's a lot outside my team, and it really spans across strategy teams, business owners, solution architects, IT operations experts. So the whole variety of people having to work with solid, reliable data to do their job and take decisions, they are basically working with our platform internally. There's, since the acquisition, for sure, a lot of more use cases and demand coming on my team. That's why I'm currently building up a center of expertise for LeanIX in our company, because I had it as a one-man show in the past, but for 100,000 people and a lot of architects in the different roles, it's not manageable anymore to further grow it. We have a lot of integration to the platform. I will not go into that in the details, but if you want to be hearing more about it, want to deep dive on one of the elements, feel free to come over in one of the breaks. Happy to drive you through. And with that, I'm at the very end, and thanks a lot for listening in.
Thank you. Right, Toto. Okay, you folks know the drill.